I don't think it has to be a bad thing either. People are like, oh, make sure you take a break and take a step back. It's like, well, maybe my mental health thing is being in it, all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm okay with that, and maybe that's okay.
That was a clip from today's guest. Everybody, I am super psyched on this one. There's nothing I like more than talking to someone who is a business owner, who kind of built their own path, did their own thing, but is also really dedicated to using their platform and their industry to create change. And change could be like a huge change, and it also could be like local, as long as it's meaningful and it changes people's lives. And this is such a conversation that represents that, plus just someone who's cool, who's got a cool history. But before we get to it, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, especially subscribe. It is a huge help. My name is Aram Arslanian, and this is One Step Beyond. Karrie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right, so for the uninitiated, for those who don't know, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Karrie Arthurs, and I am a professional tattooer. Yeah.
Okay, so tattooing, obviously, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're a fan.
I'm a fan.
If we think about it, let's just start from like the business perspective. Like, when did you start getting involved in not just the enjoying tattoos, but actually getting into like the business side of the tattoo industry?
I think we've always been in the business side of the tattoo industry, because it's like, as a tattooer, you're always self-employed from the beginning, right? But I started owning a shop in 2007. Yeah.
When did you start making your primary living off of tattooing?
I started tattooing in 2000, and then primary living, like not having a secondary job, would have been, I'd say 2003, maybe 2002, maybe even sooner. But yeah, I was just working at a gas station or whatever in the morning, and then I would go to the shop for noon, so long days.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't have there was no career. It was art school, tattooing. That's it.
So when you went to art school, did you plan on going into tattooing, or did you just kind of find it?
I wanted to quit like my first year. I was like, I could be learning how to tattoo and making money, but my parents encouraged me to stay, and I had some profs that encouraged me to stay, so I went through. Yeah.
And any regrets on that, or were you happy?
No, I liked it. I mean, it's not like you go to art school and you're going to get, well, depending on what you do, but the majority of students there, especially in the fine art division, were not getting jobs after. So you're paying for an experience, a learning experience, and you have to kind of be okay with that, I think. But maybe because I had a different angle, it was easier for me. But yeah, I liked it. It was good.
So when was your first real, any kind of meaningful interaction with tattoo culture? Like, when did you become even aware of tattoos, really?
When I was 16, or maybe even younger. I could have been 14, 15, probably. I went into a tattoo shop with my cousin, and in Edmonton, and she was getting a tattoo touched up or was going in for some photos. I remember she had a big butterfly on her ankle. Anyway, went in with her, and I was like, ooh, this place is so cool. It was just very, very old school kind of biker shop, scary dudes tattooing with big beards and everything, and I loved it. And then one of the shop guys was like, he was like, if no one claims you in 30 days, can I keep you? And I was like, oh, now I want to leave. Oh, time to go. But it was that was the experience. I was like, the people are cool for the most part, and the place was cool, and I liked the vibe. Yeah.
So that was the start.
That was the start. Yeah.
And then what happened?
And then I remember I got tattooed at 16.
Tattooed where? At a shop, someone's house?
Yeah, no, at a shop, yeah.
How did that happen?
My dad went in and signed for me and got a deposit down. I think that still some people do that, tattoo underage. I don't, but definitely they do. So yeah, and then I got tattooed, and then I graduated high school and then went to art school. And then I came back to the guy who owned the shop. I'm pretty sure he was the one that tattooed me when I was 16, and he taught me how to tattoo.
So, grew up in Edmonton?
No, I was only born there, and then my parents moved to Calgary, so I lived here until about 7th grade, and then we moved back to a small town outside of Edmonton, And I lived there until I went to art school here.
So it was in that small town when you got introduced into tattooing.
Yeah.
But then when you came to school in Calgary.
Yes.
So when you were going to school and you're like, oh my gosh, like I want to go tattoo, but I'm gonna stick it out and do it. Were you getting more and more into tattoo culture? Like, did you take on an apprenticeship or anything like that?
No, not until I was done art school. It was so all consuming, that school too, and like the pressure to produce work in a timely fashion and stuff. It's like I couldn't do this one and that one. I had to just focus on my art.
So like sole focus on that, and then the big
Yes.
shift into tattooing.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about your art? Because I know you're still active as an artist as well.
Right. It's cross bridge for me. So like tattooing mirrors my art and my art mirrors tattooing now. But yeah, it's a separate practice. I think as I get older, there's more pressure for me because it's like I'm so creative in my tattoo job that when I do my art stuff, which is, a different, it's still being creative, but it's like I feel like I've put all my effort into this. And it's hard for me to go to that now. It's like I don't have enough anymore.
Yeah. So do you still do shows and those kinds of things?
I try. I haven't done a show in a while because I'm like concentrating on a body of work. I said my last solo show was 2016 at the Christine Clausen Gallery here in Calgary, and they rep me. They're great people. They so yeah, had that show, and then working on a body of work, and then the pandemic hit, and that was just a big fuck up, and like creatively especially. So it's like just trying to like roll the ball and recover from that and get back into like group shows and stuff like that would be great too.
So you finish school.
Yes.
And then you go headfirst into tattooing.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people start with an apprenticeship, and that sounds like that's what it was for you.
Yeah.
So how did you find an apprenticeship, and how was it?
I did a lot of like research. I tried to stay in Calgary because that's where I was, right? But everybody's like, oh, no hiring, no, whatever. So I was like, fuck, I could go back to this person I know in Edmonton, but then we had to uproot and move, right? I was with my my ex-husband at the time we lived here. So yes, called him. He was like, sure, get up here. So the process went, and then I showed up there. The apprenticeship itself, rough. It was rough. I was the only female in the shop at the time. My mentor wasn't, to be frank, he's a pretty abusive guy. So it was like going through that every day while trying to learn to tattoo. It was a lot of pressure and it was a lot of work. I was there for 4 years. Yeah.
Do you want to unpack that anymore, or do you want to leave it there?
No, we can talk about it. Sure.
So
yeah.
Because that is a burden, like trying to go in and learn a craft and learn a profession while also having to manage someone's behavior.
Yeah.
So like, was it like negative, like cultural negativity, like workspace cultural negativity? Was it based in gender? Like what was going on there specifically?
I think all of it, heavily based in gender too, but also just that I think that my mentor was very insecure. And it was kind of that old school train of thought where it was like, if I teach you, then you have my secrets, then you're going to take what you know and you're going to go open a shop down there and then you're going to be taking my money away from me, right? I don't think like that, but that's how he thought. And I think that there was also pressure on everyone else in that shop who worked there too. And then it was like long hours. I never got paid the amount that the other guys in the shop paid. And I was told flat out is because I was a woman. I would only make this much amount of money, even though my counterparts were making, 10% more or whatever.
What was it? Was it just literally the justification was that
Yeah.
you're a woman?
Yeah, that was it.
That's like, first, like, thank you for the honesty. Like,
I guess.
I mean, that's, as a guy, I haven't had to experience those things. So it's like my shock at that is like, it's a pretty gendered thing because it's like, I think probably many women, especially women in part of industries that were at that time kind of rooted in subculture have probably experienced a lot of similar things. But like my mind is blown by that.
Yeah.
So do you mind if we just like hit on apprenticeships in general?
Sure. Yeah. I don't mind anything.
When I talk to people from the tattoo industry, not always, but like I'd say like pretty frequently people talk about how rough apprenticeships are and how like when they've gone into owning shops or becoming like professionally like they're professional tattoo artists, that they've got a big focus on changing apprenticeships. Was there like Is there a big wave of change in how apprenticeships go now, or is it still kind of old school, or is it a bit of a mix of both?
I think it's a mix of both. I think that it definitely, there's a large percentage of it that has changed, which is good. There's kind of a new population of tattooers that have been tattooing in the last 5-10 years that approach it differently. Old school stuff is like, you have to be humiliated, you have to feel small, you have to do a bunch of work outside of tattooing to like prove yourself. Or now I think it's much more supportive and empathetic, and you're teaching somebody something, and that should be just basically it.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, because like, you know, a lot of industries will mimic kind of like weird social stuff where it's like, oh, like when you come in, we're basically going to like haze you or
Yeah.
break you down or whatever. But at the same time, it's like how you're also trying to make a living. So it's got that extra power position that's involved with it. It's super toxic and totally insane.
Of course it is. I'm like, what good comes from that?
Totally.
Right? There's no benefit in treating somebody like that at all.
Do you mind if I share something from my professional past?
Please.
I worked at this place. It was the company I worked at before I started my own thing. So I was like an adult. I'd had like a career for a long time.
Yeah.
And I went into a different industry, and the owner was the son of the founder, and had grown up in this company and had never in his entire life had a job anywhere else.
Yeah.
Like never worked at like 7-Eleven or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So zero other job experience, and was in this company, raised up in this company, and then eventually bought the company. This was just the stupidest person I've ever worked for. And we had hired someone who was a lawyer, and like a very successful lawyer, to come work at the company. It was like their next career, basically. And they were having a lot of problems kind of acclimating to this guy's style. And he said to me one day, he was like, yeah, you know, I'm just going to keep applying the pressure. I was like, I don't think you should. Like, I don't think it's a good idea. And he said to me, well, you know my style. I like to break people down and then build them back up in my image.
Okay.
So he's talking about a really successful lawyer who's already had this totally awesome career, who's like blessing us with their presence to come work at this company. And this idiot is like, thinks he's in a position, and was like being super like wild to this person, just like classic shitty boss. And there's this moment of silence when he said it, where he thought I was going to be like, oh yeah, bravo. And I was like, dude, can I tell you what my experience was? He was like, well, yeah. And I was like, I was a therapist for 10 years before I worked here. I have like a quite significant like background, education, all this. And you acted like so horribly to me, and you didn't rebuild me in my image. I just learned how to like navigate you.
Yep.
And he's like, yeah, that's what I want. And I was
okay.
oh my God. Needless to say, I ended up getting fired, as most people in that tenure of that company did.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think it's not like in any industry. I think a lot of people experience a version of this. It's interesting though, in like subculture stuff, like let's say like, you know, tattoo industry or whatever, where it's like, those smaller cultures that are supposed to like kind of look out for each other can kind of be the most toxic.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
So how did you get through it?
Marijuana.
You smoked your way through.
I smoked my way through. Yeah. I stuck to my guns, and yeah, like you said, learn to navigate. You know what I mean? Like I knew what set him off, what pissed him off. And then I knew how to just put my head down and work really hard. I just did what he said. And then I tried my best to navigate that line between how much can I get away with and stand up for myself, and am I going to get that box of pencil crayons thrown at my head later.
That kind of
yeah,
stuff.
He threw some pencil crayons at me. Yeah.
Which is like
water. I think a glass of water too. Yeah.
I know like I'm reacting, it's like, holy shit. Because again, I came up in like social services where that wouldn't happen. But I think your story is like not an uncommon story, right?
Of course not. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's uncommon at all. And I especially think that like, just because of the timing of when I started tattooing, that kind of, those kind of people in tattooing were still really prevalent, kind of saturated the market still. But now I think it's changed a bit.
And what year was this?
That was 2000 to 2004. Yeah.
So, and of course, correct me if I'm wrong here, that seems kind of like the nexus when tattooing was almost about to become like a little bit more mainstream.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think you're right, because then it's like people started using the internet and all that stuff and whatever back then. So yeah, I think it pushed it out more.
So how long did the apprenticeship last?
Technically, it was 8 months
Mhm.
from the start of learning to you're doing tattoos today,
Yeah.
like 3 tattoos by yourself.
But you say
Oh
technically.
my God. Well, because like it should have gone on way longer. And that's just when I was thrown into tattooing. I guess you could say maybe it went on like for a year at least, but yeah.
And then you start tattooing yourself. Did you stay at that shop or did you go out on your own?
No, I stayed at that shop, yeah, for 4 years, and then I moved down here.
You moved down here, and did you join another shop? Or did you...
Yep. Yeah, I worked at Heather McLean's shop. It was called Hide and Seek.
What was that like? Is that was like a different experience?
Completely different. It was great. Yeah.
So when you started, again, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, at the time that you started, women were still very underrepresented in tattooing. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there was like a lot of women tattooing. I just think that it was definitely less than today, and no one really gave a shit. You know what I mean? It was like the people that wanted to get tattooed by women were just like people in the shop who were like, oh, well, she's available, I guess. Or it was like the other side of the coin was the people who were like, oh, I just want to get tattooed by girls, and then just make it creepy, right? Yeah. So yeah, big underrepresentation. No one cared unless you were drastically different or worked harder or pushed the envelope differently. No one really gave a shit.
Like nobody cared to get tattooed by women, or nobody minded getting tattooed by a woman?
I guess nobody cared, and like other tattooers in that aspect, nobody gave a shit, right? It was like these guys were important to get tattooed by, and as their peers in tattooing, but the women were like, whatever.
So what led to starting your own shop?
Having a baby, trying to get back to work. It was like, how do I navigate being a mom? And my husband at the time, not home. Like he was a contract welder, so he's gone all the time. So I was like, how can I also tattoo while kind of being a single parent? And the easiest way for me was to open a shop and then just work my own hours. I could take her there with me if I had to, if I was stuck for childcare. It was just like, it was a necessity to open a shop. Even though I had job offers, I was like, I can't come in here for 3 hours a day and then have to go home. And you know what I mean? Like I didn't want to burden anyone. Yeah.
It's an interesting dynamic, starting your own business at the same time as having a brand new baby and effectively being a single parent.
Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of people, just one of those things would be tough. So you've got all 3 of them.
Yeah.
How did you pull it off?
I don't know. I just did. I mean, I just had to. You know what I mean?
Now, was it just you at first, or was it you and then you had a crew right away?
It was me at first. I'm not going to remember how long, maybe like 7 months or so, which I was fine with. And then, a couple people came in for sure. Yeah. And then eventually at that first space, I had maybe 3 pretty regular people. You have to cycle through a couple and be like, no, this guy's got to go. You learn.
Tell me about it.
You learn.
Tell me about it. So I know, and you'd mentioned this earlier, in this industry, there is a little bit of like, well, if I bring someone in and teach them all my secrets, then they become my competition.
Sure.
So when you made that shift into starting your own place, how was that received by the person that you were working for at that time? I
was off, right? Because I had my daughter, so I hadn't been tattooing for like, a year or so. So I didn't really have any ties to the shop anymore, but she would have been fine with it, of course.
Yeah, so totally, it was no big deal.
No.
So at what point did you start learning, like you said, being a tattoo artist, like you're a business person right away because you're essentially like a solo contractor who like you'll work in someone's shop, but you're still doing your thing. But at what point do you feel, and it could be anywhere along there, did you really start to learn about how to run a business?
I don't know. I think maybe just watching the people that I worked for, the guy who taught me, my mentor, and then I worked for Heather. So it's like watching them, those 2 styles. I was like, I would always critique how it was going and be like, oh, I definitely wouldn't do that, and that I would change. And then also being in the shop as a tattooer and then having somebody like your boss be there. So, that kind of gave me the perspective of how they felt, and that, you know, them being my friends, and the shop owner was my friends, and I could be on both sides of the fence there. So it was just a learning process, I think. Yeah.
What's different about you as being an artist who works for someone else versus you being a shop owner?
Yeah. So not only dealing with my own needs, but the needs of people who are working in the same space as me, right? Their comfort and having the equipment that they need to do their job. Just balancing everybody is different. When you're working for someone, it's like I'm worried about me and my client, and then maybe my coworkers and stuff. But you can come and go. That kind of, you know what I mean? It's like you have more distance there. But when you own the space, it's like you're always there, even in your mind, right?
I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I, came up in my career working for other people,
Right.
and was always like hypercritical,
Mm-hmm.
and was definitely like the total loudmouth. Like I was always like, oh, it should be like this, you should do it like that. And then when I became a business owner, I was like, I'm going to do things the way that I think they should be done.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things that I was like, yep, that was the way it should be done. I feel good about it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many things where I was like, oh, that's why this person was doing it, and that's why. And like I had this like I guess like, retroactive embarrassment for myself of being like, man, I just thought there were so many things that should be done a different way. And I
True.
didn't know
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't the owner of the place or the leader at the time.
Right.
So did you ever have any experiences like that once you started owning a business?
There's a lot of mistakes that you make, right? And then you learn from those mistakes. Yeah, definitely. I'm sure I've been more on the emotional side of things when people wanted to leave or wanted to or quitting, or you know what I mean. There's like, how do I separate owning a business from being emotionally involved in it as well, right? Like nothing is personal here. We're all friends, but it's all just business at the end of the day.
Tough balance, though.
Yeah, of course.
When people say that, it's like, oh, it's not personal, it's business.
Yeah.
I always encourage people to be like, it's personal and it's business.
True.
And you want to honor both.
Yeah, of course.
With that, though, how do you, again, when you work for someone's shop and
Mm-hmm.
the shop gets criticism, or people within the shop are criticizing the owner, it's like you can just feel like, oh, I'm here. But when the tables are turned, like, how have you managed any criticism, whether it's externally from others outside of the shop or people internally? Like, how have you learned how to manage that and deal with that? I
just think that you have to take everything with a grain of salt, and if you have an open door policy, and you know what I mean, if somebody has to talk about something or criticize the way that things are done, it's completely fine. I'm open to change. Like I'm not rigid on anything. So somebody's like, hey, I need to do this, or for these clients or whatever, I'm very open. Yeah, I think that we all have to be flexible. Yeah.
Is there anything that, and go into whatever level of comfort you have on this, is there any feedback that you've gotten that you're like, huh, and then you actually went and changed?
Yeah, totally. Even just small things too. Like, oh man, Sebastian was talking about, which it never even occurred to me, like medical gowns, like the ones that you wear when you go get like a procedure done. They're like the paper ones, right? But we do a lot of stuff on women on their sternum and stuff. And it's like, or even your back, like for a back piece and turning it around. Like, why wouldn't we have medical gowns in? Just something so simple. Yeah. But yeah, I was like, totally, that's a great idea. And then I went and got them. Yeah. But even just the small things, yeah. Right?
Speaking of Sebastian, and you and I were talking about this before we started recording, your response to our request for you to be on the show was totally unique. We'd never had anyone do that before. Do you mind if I share it?
No.
So like, when we asked you to be on the show, you were like, yeah, like I'm into that, but I get interviewed a lot. Why don't you interview these people that I can tell you about that are newer in their careers or younger in their careers, who come from maybe groups who are a little underrepresented in tattooing? Why don't we give them the spotlight, and then we'll talk later. Mm-hmm. And we ended up having these great people to be on the show. And at the time I was laughing. I was like, why am I so surprised by this? We've never had anyone do that. And of course, we're always grateful when people want to be on the show. Mm-hmm. But usually people are like, heck yeah, like I want to come on and talk. Yeah. I've never had someone be like, yes, but let's do this first, just so we can make sure other people get the voice. What was important about that for you?
Like you said, other people get their voice. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of underrepresented people in tattooing and those subcultures within. And I think that at some point you have to be like, Maybe you've heard this story.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I feel like I don't have anything new to say. And I think that they have a lot to say.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's important to me.
Well, for sure. And it is a little bit like in the role that I have, like the kind of work that I do, but also doing the podcast, a lot of people talk about wanting things to be different and how things need to change. And a lot of people do a lot of cool things. But that was one of the most just practical, like, oh, I think this should be different, so I'm going to make it different. And that's why it stood out to me, because it was just like small direct actions and how they can change things like pretty significantly over time.
True. Yeah.
So speaking of change, I know that when you began in the tattoo industry, it was like quite a bit different. And I don't just mean like, it could be like on any level. What are some of the important changes that you think have been taking place in the industry, and what's been leading to them changing? I
think definitely there's a lot more intolerance in the industry right now. I think that the Me Too movement kind of swept through it during the pandemic there in 2020 and 21 pretty hard. And I think that was a change that needed to happen. I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done, but yeah, more accountability, and then people being more aware of other tattooers and their intentions and stuff.
Yeah, there was like a huge wave during the pandemic.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting because it was after what was like the kind of like, I guess we'd say like the mainstream wave of it. It came afterwards. Is there, like, what are your thoughts on that? Why was it kind of like, I guess like the term I'd use is delayed?
Because I don't think that anyone wants to fucking rock that boat here. I think that we're just sailing down the stream of, it's like we're, everyone's just so quiet about it. I don't know. We're all in this together on this boat, and no one wants to be the one to rock it a bit or to tip it. Everyone's just like, culpable. We're all culpable. That's what's happening.
So what happened though when it started to shake? People reacted though, right?
Oh, hard. Yeah, big time. Yeah.
What other shakes need to happen?
I think that we're in a state now where we've had this big upset, and now we're kind of like, oh, let's go back to almost how it was. We'll still be like talking about it and teaching about it, and people are doing workshops and stuff, which is great. But I still think that there's a real collective amnesia where people are like, oh, call this person out, or Sammy did, and now let's just not worry about it, and he'll just tattoo at the shop and no one will say anything. You know what I mean? It's like it went really high and then now it's kind of plateaued. Right. People don't care anymore. I don't know what the problem is.
So what should happen? It's
tough to say what should happen, because I think that deep down it's like, if someone being I don't want to say victim, so let's say survivor, someone being a survivor of abuse from someone who tattoos, has a career in tattooing, they should be the ones that are like, okay, now we need to talk about it, and then opens that floodgates for everybody speaking up about it. But I think until that happens, and you can't push people to do that, right? It's hard to finger point. I think unless you have your own experience, I don't know. Everybody has to tiptoe for some reason, which is weird.
You'd mentioned there's like, you'd said, we're doing some workshops, things are happening. So like, how has the industry risen to the challenge? Like what are the different things that are out there to like at least educate people or keep that change going?
I think that a lot of people have done like educational work, right? And trying to inform clients of what's expected when you come, and what should be expected as a person getting tattoos. And I think it's like informative work for how people should behave in the workplace and how they should be interacting with the people they work with, and also their clients. I think that people need more education on that. Yeah.
Education. So just speaking, like I work in the corporate sector.
Right.
And one of the things that there's been a lot of talk about is how DEI initiatives are losing funding. And there's kind of like what was a quiet backlash towards them to like an increasingly vocal backlash towards them, where there was that, kind of like you said, there was this like big spike of action and interest and conversation and gone down. And I wouldn't say it's even plateaued. It's kind of, it's going slow down, kind of like slowly downhill. And when I talk to people about it, I think there's more of a sense of like, yeah, but I don't want to be that person. Like I want change, but I don't want to be that person who's like, basically like the annoying person in the room who keeps talking about that everyone just stops listening to. So like, I don't know what to do.
I feel like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, I have ideas of what's to be done, but like any other thoughts that you have? Like, how do we push past that? Oh, you're the annoying person who can't let it go. Like, how do we keep it from going down? Because it's very hard to keep everything at high intensity all the time, but how do we keep it from like slowly going downhill or even sharply going downhill?
I don't know. I guess to get more people to be the annoying person with you. I'm not sure. But that's how I think everything is portrayed. It's like they have the one scapegoat person for the whole idea behind it. And then they're like, oh, I don't like this guy anymore. Quiet. You know what I mean? But I think if you look at everything, it's like that.
Yeah.
Every big movement.
Totally. 100%. And why I think like the internet is so great for being able to bring people together to talk about things, and then also why the internet sucks so bad.
Yeah.
This, right?
Both.
Totally. Well, that's like bringing it back to your shop. One of the things that so when companies talk to me about this, and it's not like lots of companies are like, oh my gosh, Aram, help us like stem this thing. Because my background and expertise is not DE&I. That's not, I'm always very cautious to play in that playground, because it's like, it's so easy to do a bad job with stuff like that. And like, once you do a bad job, you give people 8,000 excuses to not keep that work going. But when people do consult with me about it, one of the things I'd say is like, well, why don't you just build your business differently? Like build different kinds of businesses. So rather than having these differently named training programs every 6 months, why don't you just like fundamentally change how you hire, train, and like build up your workforce? And over time, it should course correct. So it's like, not like just like train your way out of it, but like fundamentally rebuild your business. And that's like something that around your shop, I feel is like, well, yeah, that's that in practice. Why don't you just like build like a different kind of shop, and that kind of thing catches fire and goes. And then people can have a choice, right? It's like people are like, I want to stick with this kind of old school thing. That's what I identify with, or I want to follow something new, which makes me super interested about your shop, because it operates in a pretty interesting way.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on anything I just said there? Anything you want to add in?
Not really. I want to know how you think it operates in an interesting way.
One of the things I think is super cool is there's not a front desk. You just like walk in and there you are.
I've never had a front desk.
What?
Yeah.
And to anyone who's not into tattoo culture, like the front desk is like the front desk. It's like,
I guess.
But isn't it? Like, do you see a lot of shops without a front desk?
Not really, no.
So what happens when people walk into your shop?
Yeah, they just stand there until one of us looks up and says, "Hey, what's up?"
Right. And then what happens?
Well, we talk to them. Usually, I think the majority of stuff is done over email and social media correspondence now. But yeah, they'll come in, and then we'll just, if somebody is usually not doing something upstairs, we'll just call them and they'll come down and talk to the person who's there. Or I'll tell them to come over to my station if I'm there alone.
Right.
I just can't hear them.
Because there's not like a desk person.
No, there never needed to be a desk person, especially when I was on my own. Like for an everyday routine aspect, it was like, the phone wasn't ringing. There wasn't a ton of people coming in. Like, what was there for them to do? But also because it's like, a front desk person always felt like this blockade for me. Whereas like you walked into the shop and it's like an intimidating person behind an intimidating desk, and they're basically like, why the fuck are you here? It's almost like you had to go into a shop and be like, please tattoo me. Like,
right. I
have money, but apparently I have to go through this criteria of this person thinks I'm cool enough to get a fucking tattoo here, which is ridiculous.
Right.
So it's just removing that barrier. It never needed to be in there in the first place.
It's funny you say that. So when I was in college, I worked at a record store, and there's this weird thing about just being behind the counter at the record store where people would treat you differently.
Yeah,
like,
it's an authority. You're a person of authority now.
If I'm just like going through the bins beside someone, I'm just like like whatever. But just because I happen to be 1 or 2 feet over behind the glass desk, people are like, hey, and I'd be like, this is so weird. Like, I don't care. I'm not judging. I mean, I can't help but judge what some people would buy like musically, but of course. but like, nobody's mean, especially that shop. It was the shop called Singles Going Steady, and the owner, Pete, was so nice. And everyone who worked there was super nice. But it was a weird dynamic. And it's true. It's like, you know, when you're at a tattoo shop, it's like you walk in, it's like there's someone behind the desk, you know, like it does have that thing. And when Monica had shared that you don't have a desk person or like a front desk, I was like, that's cool. Like it's because like suddenly you're talking with someone who's like very likely going to tattoo you, or is like is tattooing people. It's just a different kind of dynamic. It's like boom, you're in. Like you're into the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So something else that stood out to me is like your shop isn't. And I've been primarily tattooed in tattoo shops where it's just like a bunch of dudes who all look like me working in a tattoo shop. So I'm not like against that. It's just that's how I've come up. But your shop isn't that.
No.
Your shop is much more representative of different backgrounds and identities. Intentional or unintentional?
No, I think unintentional. I'm not trying to like put people in there who are intentionally different or from a subculture or bringing business that way. These people, I know them. They wanted to come into the space, and if the vibe's good and there's a station and we mesh well, then it doesn't really matter who they are, I suppose. It's
super organic because
it's always been really organic. Yeah,
because it doesn't have that what I feel can sometimes be a little like I'm trying to show what a good a person I am by who I hire, rather it's like I want to give everyone a venue as long as the vibe is right and the right people find you.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you've made the wrong hire, I think usually you figure it out pretty quick, right? It doesn't take long. We're in such close quarters in there too. So if somebody's not like, it's just not working. It's just not working. Yeah.
So let's talk pandemic.
Yeah.
How did you do it?
That was wild. I remember Craig and I tattooing, and we would have. Remember when they did that? Like they do their 3-week or 2-week update, and it's our premier and the health minister, and they're talking about whether they're going to do lockdowns or whatever. So we would be tattooing, and we would have the update on TV, and we would be watching it. We'd be like, fuck, here it comes. And then he'd be like, yeah, we're locking down for a month or whatever. So Craig and I would have this week before lockdowns, and we would just pack people in. Like, I'm talking fucking noon to midnight. We would work so hard. It would be super draining and stressful. And then we would be locked down for 3 months. So we would just try to make a mad push and then lock down. The lucky thing is I had a super good landlord who went through that rent subsidy program, so I didn't have to pay rent the whole time. The guys weren't on rent, so we didn't worry about them because they were still on percentage back then. So it was like if you weren't working, you weren't contributing. Obviously, if I'm not working, I'm not making money either. We're all in the same boat, right? So just made it. It was 6 months we didn't work. Rough.
That is so wild. So what did you do with yourself during that time?
Well, I built a home gym because gyms closed down, and I'm like, if I can't tattoo or get exercise, I'm gonna kill myself, like literally. Super depressed. And then I remember it was just like a lot of bike rides with my kids, trying to be outside because they were off school. Yeah, it was hard. It was super hard making art, trying to be creative. Man, it was rough. I remember Max and I, who was at my shop at the time, we were both straight edge. We had been straight edge for 10 years, and we started drinking. We're like, oh, this is done.
The pandemic took out many an edge. Many an edge went down by the pandemic.
Yeah.
Can we tuck into mental health for a sec?
Yeah.
So, as mentioned to you earlier, I grew up playing music and have had the great fortune of knowing a lot of musicians, a lot of artists from all different kinds of backgrounds of their art. One thing that I've noticed has been a through line, not for everyone, but for a lot of people involved in kind of like artistic pursuits, are challenges with mental health.
True. And
how they manage it. So I'm interested in this both from like a personal side and also like a boss side. Like, how do you manage both supporting employees who may have some kind of mental health concerns and anything around your mental health?
I manage my mental health. I don't know. Sometimes I don't think I manage it super good. I'm a very solitary person, so I isolate a lot. But I try and have, just keep going and have positive interactions. The people at the shop, I'm always, man, I've had coworkers that I went to AA meetings with. I've had people want to talk about stuff after hours. I'm always a friend to everybody, and I try and be super supportive mental health wise for anything that people need, if it's anxiety issues or depression issues. Yeah.
On my side, like, so I own my own business, and pandemic was wild, but because a lot of people that I work with, most of us come from the kind of like punk and hardcore, and we have good friendships. Like we all kind of knew each other beforehand, or got to know each other very well because we have those like similar counter or subculture kind of things. And then also we have some people who are just normal like business people. But overall, during the pandemic, we were pretty good. But it was where I was finding the biggest dip and challenge is post-pandemic. Because like, okay, we can work again, we can do all these things. And we didn't stop working. In fact, my work schedule was nuts during the pandemic. But afterwards, our business, as a result of the pandemic, grew quite a bit. We just were really lucky with how we're positioned in the market, like all the kind of right things happened. And now I feel like I'm just trying to keep like the wheels from falling off half the time. And that's where I saw some challenges with people. And one of the things I've been working on is not setting a bad example. Because like I work really hard. I get up super early. I work late. I'm constantly working on doing emails, like always in the mix. Something I realized, it's like I can have all of these like mental health stuff. I can like listen to people. I can do that. But it's like, I'm setting this terrible example because I'm like a maniac. I work constantly. This is my business. Of course. So that's something I've been trying to gear back on like really, really hard and like demonstrate that I will not work during certain, I'll try hard not to work during certain times.
Yeah. Boundaries are good, right?
They are, but it's so easy to be like, oh, we've got boundaries. But then like, you know, once your own business, it's nuts.
Of course. Yeah. I think if you have that, if you're that kind of person too, who just always, you like the work and you want to keep going. It's hard to be like, I have to take a step back.
I'm a builder. I love building things. And like when I was a little kid, Lego was my favorite toy.
Nice.
And I love putting things together, bringing people together, creating things.
Yeah.
And I almost don't even care what it is that we're creating. I just like people coming together to do something. And I am the worst when it comes to work because I just get like ultra obsessed about getting certain goals and getting them done. I'm highly competitive.
Yeah.
And I believe competitive in like a healthy way, like not a toxic way.
Sure. Yep.
But I have a hard time like basically putting down the pen and being like, okay, enough is enough. I have to have these boundaries. But I'm like the first person we'll talk about having boundaries and good health stuff. Yeah. Being a boss for me, it isn't hard to come up with ideas or to execute on any ideas. It's knowing when to pump the brakes so that everyone gets a little bit of a break.
Right. Yeah, well, especially if you're just affecting yourself, then what does it matter? You don't have to put your pen down if you love it. But I mean, you would know if you need to. But if you're affecting people around you, then obviously, I mean, that you have to be supportive to your staff, right?
Totally. If you asked me what I thought like proper work day was, I'd be like when the work is done.
Well, sure, but that's okay for you, which is fine. You can go all night. They want to go to bed.
It never is done. It totally is never done.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be a bad thing either. People are like, oh, make sure you take a break and take a step back. It's like, well, maybe my mental health thing is being in it, all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm okay with that, and maybe that's okay.
Well, part of my mental health, I'd say, like the way that I keep myself going, like for sure, physical exercise is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
I blew out my knee 2 years ago.
Ouch, sorry.
Thank you. It has been the most humbling thing of all time. It's the first time I ever felt, like there are a couple moments in my life where were truly humbling and where I just like fell flat on my face, ate complete shit. And I've usually come back from it and been like, oh, that was the thing, that was the game changer for me. Yeah. I'm like a better person from it, or I'm a better business person, or I'm a better partner, like whatever it is. This is the only time I ate shit, and there hasn't been a happy ending so far, where I was like, I was overdoing it on my knee. I was running too hard. Because I was a runner. Yeah. And I was trying to do this 100-day challenge that I myself made up for literally no reason. And I was like, I'm gonna run 100 days. And I had done one already and was like, I'll do another one. And it was December, icy, terrible conditions. And I was out running and I felt something go when I slipped.
Oh no.
And of course I kept running and I kept running. And Monica was like, I think you tore your meniscus. And I was like, oh, it's fine. I ran for another 3-ish months, and then basically I could barely walk for 6 months.
Oh my gosh.
And now it's like enough on the mend where I can do stuff again. So I'm like, doing Peloton or whatever, but there's no happy ending. I'm not like, this is what I've learned. I'm like, this sucks. But my mental health during that time was like anxiety through the roof, like super worried about the business. I was also going through like a really difficult divorce at the time. So it was like really tough.
Yep.
But the difference that I notice when I have like just even a basic workout routine every day, and I'm managing my diet well, where I'm just like being more thoughtful what I eat. It's like crazy. It's just like flipping on a light. Like it's from like, I'm hyper focused on work and I'm going to work nonstop to, oh, I know when to stop. So part of it is for me is just like diet and exercise.
Of course.
It helps me judge better.
Yeah, I think that's everybody. And we forget that too, that we're in this, mechanical meat suit, and it's not going to work the same as this.
Totally.
Right? we think we're okay, but we're not. So we have to have that. We have to have the fundamentals.
I've never heard mechanical meat suit before. What do you do though? Like, what's your exercise?
I have a home gym, so I do. I used to do powerlifting, and then I kind of phased out of that, and now I'm just doing a lot of like weight stuff, just trying to be like fit and lean and keep going. I had to take a huge pause for a while because I had some terrible pain issues, some health stuff for a while. So now I'm just slowly getting back into it.
Did you have to do something about it, or was it just kind of like rest and recuperation?
For my pain stuff? Yeah. Oh no, it was, I've had a lot of health issues in my life. The newest one was that I had this reoccurrent pain in my elbow for like 2 years. And my trainer was like, it's coming from your rhomboids or whatever, rotator cuff injuries. And then I'm trying to like, I have a physiotherapist, I have a chiropractor, I have a massage. Like I'm pretty big on self-care because I don't have the best health. So already I need to maintain better. So it turned out that I have advanced arthritis in my C5 and C6. And because of doing this for my whole fucking life, right? Putting your head down and drawing, even when I was a child. So all that is built up to now. So what it was doing was crushing down on my nerve that led to my elbow and come down into these 2 fingers. So the nerve pain alone, and also hurt my shoulder, I wanted to kill myself. I'm not even kidding. It got to a level of extremity where I'm like, I said to my doctor, it's gonna stop. Either you're gonna fix it or I'm gonna die. Like, I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
I wanna cut my arm off. It's that excruciating.
Yeah.
And then that just, everything goes downhill from there. Your mental health is gone because you're in pain all the time, right? So just coming out of that now.
So what did you do?
Went on some crazy neurological medication. And then that turns your brain off in the part where it says, don't make this nerve hurt.
Wow.
So obviously it's not a means to an end, but I mean, I can't reverse the arthritis. So it's like, this is always going to be, right? So now I've trained my brain. I'm coming off this drug, which is a wild drug because it changes the mechanics of how your brain works.
I feel like that's very similar, if not the exact same thing, as like the headbangers curse. Like, like Tom from Slayer and like Dave Mustaine had to get like operations on that because they're always like,
there you go. Yes, looking down. Yeah, you're not really meant to do that for a long period of time.
Well, at least you're up there with some greats though. Some greats of the genre.
Yeah, but yeah, that's just like that small thing, and then you're in your late 40s, and it's like, oh, hey, guess what? Now it's an issue.
Around your kids, what's their interaction with the tattoo culture? Is it just like, oh, this is what our parent does? Yeah. Or are they have any interest in it?
Interest in it maybe as far as getting tattooed, but no interest in it in being a tattooer.
Yeah. How did you do that balance of parenting, especially like single parenting and running your own business?
I just found luckily I found a lady running a day home that would take, actually no, I found my friend who I tattooed who also had like a childcare background, and she wasn't doing much. So I was like, I kind of coerced her into being my nanny because my daughter was 8 months and I couldn't put her in a day home until she was like a year or a year and a half. So I was like, what do I do? So my parents didn't live close. I had no support here. So I luckily got her to do it. So she would come pick Skylar up at the shop and then take her back to my house.
Well, I'm like big on mentors, and I never came up with a mentor when I was young.
Right.
And I was not, like, I didn't grow up in a close family. Like, my family went on to become close as we got older.
Okay.
But we were under, like, we had a very challenging situation when I was young. So, like, I kind of grew up rudderless a little bit, you know. And that, because of that, I believe so much in mentorship and coaching and all that kind of stuff. So if we were thinking from, like, both personal and professional, or either or, whichever, who are your mentors? Who are the people that, like, you can say, yeah, that was someone who's a bit of a North Star for me?
My parents, my brother. My parents they're older now. They're in their 70s, but they're like, they've been self-employed for the last, since I would say for the last 25 years, they've been self-employed. So that's a big, and they've always been super supportive of me, help me out anytime. My brother, he runs a car dealership. He's a dealer principal, so he's always been super supportive, seeing somebody on that aspect too. And then, I have a couple tattooer friends. One of them's named Stuart McKellar. He works in Scotland. He's always been super close to me and a really good friend. I have another one in Washington that I used to see a lot. His name's Casey Lang. So yeah, just keeping some good friends close. Yeah.
So any professional who's been, like, at all successful, even like minorly successful, but someone who's got, like, a pretty significant history of success, which I believe is true for you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, and I think it speaks for itself. You're going to be put in a position where people look up to you.
Sure.
And you're going to have people who just interact with you a little bit who look up to you, or people who, like, want to work with you or apprentice underneath you. So what approach do you take to dealing with people who look up to you or view you as a mentor?
I don't know. I just try and be myself. Yeah.
What about in terms of, like, apprenticeship? Because you'd had, like, kind of a tough apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Like, what practices do you take? Like, how do you handle having an apprentice?
I think I'm pretty empathetic. I think that I remember that I'm teaching a person who's just a person like me how to do my job, which is what I do. I try not to be emotionally involved. I try and be a good listener and try and understand their needs. Try and be more compassionate and with their work schedules and stuff. Yeah.
And then if we go back to the industry, so yeah, the industry seems to have made some changes, and some really, really cool changes. And there's just, like, it's neat now, like, when I go into a shop, it's like, I feel like almost from shop to shop, it's like things do seem to be different. Like, people are a little bit more, like, empathetic, a little bit more sensitive. Yep. It seems a little bit more, like, raw.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I only go to a very few amount of shops, but
of course,
it just seems like the vibe is different.
That's good. Yeah.
If you're thinking about the next, like, 5 years or 10 years, what are the hills the industry still needs to climb?
I think the hills of not tolerating intolerance and not being a supporter of people who are known abusers or people who have taken advantage of people. I think that a lot of that has to be a lot of letting things slide. No more letting things slide. I think there has to be a really stern mentality going forward for zero tolerance. And then as far as other things go, man, I hope it gets busy again within the next 5 years. So that'd be nice. Yeah. People making a substantial living again off of it. Yeah. I don't know if the landscape is different now, so I don't know if it's ever going to be the same.
Well, it's so wild because, like, across industries, I have a good friend in Toronto. Shout out Hambone, love you. Friend of the show, Chris Hamill. He has some barbershops in Toronto, and he was like, dude, it's pandemic. Obviously, during the pandemic, it was a nightmare. But he's like, as a result, like, people working from home, nobody wants to come downtown. Yeah. Downtown core jobs are just, like, dying.
Yep. Yeah, that just flipped everything in the pandemic. Nothing's been the same since then. Yeah, nothing. People included.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I totally agree. Our business, I'm always so appreciative of what happened during the business, because I remember when the pandemic started, I was like, well, that was nice having a business. Yeah. And then suddenly it changed, and we were just in this wild position where we had already done everything online. Not because I was, like, smart and thought that was the future. I just did it because I was like, I just started a business. We don't have an office, so I guess we do everything online.
Yep.
And then suddenly everything went online, but we were already positioned to do it. And as our competitors kind of like dropped off, we just work funneled in.
Yeah,
it was
good.
right time, right place. But I have just so much time for people who are out of different experience, because a lot of the real traditional things where you have to be in person, they haven't come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. Yeah.
All right, we're about to go into the crucial three. That means there are three really difficult questions. They're going to scale up in difficulty. We'll start easy. What's one thing, and it can be personal or professional, that you discovered that you wanted to work on about yourself?
Yep.
And that you've been successful in changing. So you're not still working on it. You've got it. You've changed it. What's one thing?
Oh man.
I told you this is
You
gonna be hard.
should have given me them beforehand. I could do my research. One thing that I've changed personally and professionally. Okay. Professionally, I think just being more outspoken, and then also remember going back to being the annoying loud person. I think professionally, I like to give. This is stuff that I've accomplished. Yeah. Let's hope that I've accomplished more of the person who's like, hey, I'm gonna speak up first, and then I'll pave this road, and everybody can come through now. Maybe making it more safe and acceptable to be like, oh, they spoke up and nothing terrible happened. No one died. Maybe the rest of us can. So maybe giving people a platform. I think maybe I've been successful at that, trying to, but not always being the annoying person, but be the person to say, here is the bullhorn,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You can use it. Maybe that.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
Okay.
All right. What's one thing that you have been working on personally, professionally, that you have yet to succeed at?
I don't know. Maybe just being more of a social being in general. I think I'm kind of an introverted extrovert, right? So I think professionally being more interactive with my industry, even my art industry too, would be beneficial. I don't think I've gotten there yet. Yeah, bridge that gap.
Right on it. All right, you ready for the last one?
Okay.
So, big Nas fan, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. What is a really tough Nas question?
Oh no.
I'll tell you, because I know you just went to the show and it was great.
Yeah.
What was one part of the show that was way better than you thought it was going to be? And what's one part of the show that wasn't as good as it could have been?
I don't think there was like full songs start to finish, right? So that would have been great. In my experience, we were pretty high at the show, so some of it all blurred together. What was so great? Fuck, Method Man was so great. Yeah, and that guy, he is in such amazing shape.
Yeah.
Like, he took his shirt off and I was like, whoa, what the hell?
Yeah.
You look great. I mean, he must be in his 50s now. But yeah, he was super energetic and just like vibing off the crowd. And that was like, that performance was so good. Yeah.
It's so funny you say that about Method Man. Method Man right now is a little bit of my icon around like getting back into shape.
Yeah.
He looks amazing.
It's crazy. Yeah, crazy good.
So
good
like,
him.
I don't know, I was maybe 6 months ago. And when I talk about like being in shape, it's like, I don't care about like body size or any of those things. Just like feeling comfortable in the way that I am, and also feeling like energetic and healthy, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Probably like 6 months ago, I was like so bummed. I was like eating poorly. I was working like crazy, all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like, because the stuff with my knee was so bad, I had started running again, and then my knee just like really went out. And it was that kind of moment where my doctor was like, what is wrong with you? Like, you're not going to run again. Like, get over it. So I was like, just bummed. And there was this little clip on YouTube of Method Man talking about like some beef.
Yeah.
And not that he was involved in beef, but he was just like kind of being Method Man and joking about it. He was like, whoa, people were beefing. And I was listening to the story, but Mara's like, Method Man looks great. He's lost a lot of weight. He looks really healthy. He looks really ripped.
Mm-hmm.
And I started reading more about it. I'm like, Method Man, you are my inspiration. Literally since then, I've been like pushing on it. So yeah, I'm so glad. Yeah, Method Man rocks, Wu-Tang
Yeah.
rocks. I'm glad you had a good time.
Mhm.
All right, that's it. We have hit it. Anything you
Nice.
want to say as we're closing off?
Nope. Thanks for having me, though.
You bet. You are awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for offering up a few people for us to interview as well who are totally fantastic.
Yeah.
All
Great.
right. Awesome. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. Please check out all the links below that's going to give you Karrie's info and where you can find the shop. And with that, we'll see you next time on One Step Beyond.